Republican politicians who support the repeal of the Affordable Care Act are already receiving a lot of pushback from their constituents who aren't in favor of it, since after all, it's a program that has very high approval ratings, which seems to be lost in all the talk about its repeal. And as a result of that, some of them are having to face hard questions. Some are being forced to sneak out the back door of a building to avoid hard questions. And we've got an example of that right here. This week, Representative Mike Coffman, a Republican of Colorado, co-authored an op-ed in the Denver Post with his fellow Republican Congressman from Colorado, defending their support for repealing the ACA. The lawmakers promised a Republican plan that, quote, envisions expanding protections that existed before the ACA was even around, and did nothing to reassure their constituents who were worried about people losing health insurance in Colorado. So Coffman comes back and he has this event where he's going to meet one-on-one with constituents. It was supposed to run from 2 to 3:30 and allow for those one-on-one conversations. Because of the turnout, which he wasn't expecting, he met with them 4 at a time, ultimately speaking with only about 70 people, according to his representatives, and leaving far more waiting. He also left before the event was even supposed to end, and he didn't walk out triumphantly. It looked a little bit more like this.
There he goes.
Next time, please be sure you hear all your constituents.
That still wanted to speak to you. They are. You might want to go in there now. That's where the riot's going to be.
Have a good afternoon.
Okay, he snuck out, and he snuck out early. Oh my God! And he snuck out early.
That was the back door, and he snuck out of it.
So there's a guy who was number 41 in line, and he said they didn't even come close to getting to him. So he's like, I don't know where in the world they got the number 70 for the number of people that they met with.
He says 17 to 20, he thinks.
It is the actual number of people that he met with. Now, if you say, well, look, hundreds of people showed up, to be fair to him, it would take a long time. Well, he could have at least finished how long the meeting was supposed to be. He could have gotten to maybe 21 to 25 people, right? But he didn't want, and they very clearly said to anyone coming in, the very few, about 20 or so that did make it in out of the hundreds, this is not to be recorded. Why does he sneak out the back? Why doesn't he go talk to the overall crowd of his constituents? Because he doesn't want it on tape where his constituents are yelling at him, going, I'm going to lose my insurance. And what's going to happen to me if I lose my insurance? That looks really bad.
Look what happened to Paul Ryan.
Yeah. So that's why he's got to get the hell out of there. It's not like he's their representative or anything, right? Of course he is, but in reality he represents the donors, and that's why he wants to get the hell out of Dodge and get back to a safe little fundraiser where all of them agree that we should get rid of everybody's insurance so that the richest people in the country can get on average $7 million, which is what's going to happen when they repeal Obamacare.
Yeah, I absolutely love that this happened. I'm sure that these sorts of events generally are like TA office hours in college. Like, nobody goes there. He goes for an hour and a half. He sits, he plays Candy Crush, and then he goes home. The fact that his constituents, and hopefully this is being replicated for congressmen around the country, are fighting back against the people who are trying to repeal Obamacare without any replacement in sight, that is exactly what needs to be happening. Also, I have no idea what backdoor politics is, but it makes me incredibly uncomfortable. I don't know what that is. I don't like it, though.
So Coffman runs, and for the first time, I began to think, I believe they're going to repeal all of Obamacare. I think they're going to say, damn the torpedoes. They have no brakes in the car. They're just going to be like, yeah, 20, 30 million people, we're going to throw them off of insurance, and we're going to give the giant tax raise. Like, who cares, right? But for the first time, as I saw hundreds of those people gathered and are super pissed, I began to think they might reconsider. Like, they might reconsider in the middle of the repeal. So I'm not talking about the huge protests this weekend that happened all across the country, in Maine, in Portland, and in Colorado, and the list goes on, right? I'm not talking about organized Democrats trying to, get them on the record. No, I'm talking about real people. One of the women in that local news report that I watched in Colorado where Coffman ran, she said, I have a pre-existing condition. It's breast cancer. I used to be on my husband's health insurance when he was employed, but my husband died. So I'm on my own now. Now, if they take away the Affordable Care Act, I have a pre-existing condition. I won't have insurance. I can't afford it.
Yeah.
What happens if my cancer comes back? And then she started to break down and cry. and saying, I could die. Now, that is some heavy stuff, and that is going to happen to millions of people across the country. So these Republicans with no brakes in their car, I don't think they realize what they're messing with.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if they'll realize it right after they repeal the whole thing, in the middle of repealing the whole thing, but at some point there's going to be a reckoning, because people are not going to be normal angry when their life
when people are dying.
Yeah, when their life is on the line, or someone they know, their life is on the line. Then stuff gets super serious. And if you saw that Aurora, Colorado crowd, they're all white. It's not like, oh yeah, the minorities, they don't want to die. Right? No, Coffman's in a Republican district. The white people in his district also don't want to die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, buyer beware, okay? You guys think that you're in charge of everything and there are no rules left anymore and standard politics doesn't matter and you could just crush your voters to oblivion and hand everything over to your donors. Okay, but you might have a routing coming in your direction that like we've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, there are some issues that it's difficult to explain to people how bad it is, or that doesn't really have a human face to it. But as one of the consequences of what's going to happen to literally 30 to 33 million people, every one of those people is going to be a political ad against these individual congressmen. And people are literally going to be dying because they're thrown off of their coverage, or we talk about some of the components of Obamacare that are incredibly popular, and I think we often forget about one of them, but it's minimum coverage in these plans. And before, you could have health insurance for people, but it wouldn't cover the things that they're actually sick with. Like, for instance, you could have coverage for somebody with cancer and it doesn't cover chemotherapy because there were no minimums for that sort of thing. Obamacare instituted those sorts of minimums to make sure that the health insurance actually meant something when you had it. But they're going to get rid of that too, theoretically, which means that people are going to be dying of things that could have easily been cured under the system we have these days.
See, what Obamacare gave them a taste of, and it was wildly imperfect, and we were right all along that they should have had a lot better checks on pricing. That progressives said that, not conservatives, progressives, okay? And we wish they had the public option. We hope that they go to Medicare for all and single payer. And now all of a sudden people are beginning to discuss that like it's a legitimate option. So thank God for Bernie Sanders and the people who fought for that. And maybe through this disaster when they repeal it, we will go in that better direction. But what Obamacare did do, to be fair to President Obama and all the people who passed it, is it gave people a taste of what a decent society looks like, where we actually take care of one another. And now when you try to take that back and go, no, you're back in the woods, and if you got anything wrong with you, we feed you to the wolves and we move on. And I think that people are not going to want to go back to that madness, that indecency, and to those woods. So there's some chance they leave the Republicans in those woods and come back in this direction.
You know, just to what you said, it's funny because I just read a poll about this, about some of the effects of Obamacare being taken away. And so they polled people who had gained insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And this is controlling for them using it. So this is not even people who have used their health insurance in a big way. Simply having it, they expressed higher life satisfaction and also felt more secure in their health. Like they felt better about their body and their life, even though they hadn't had to use the insurance for anything, simply having it. And that's a demonstration of what you're saying. They felt like they were in a civil society, and they were in an advanced society.
And by the way, that's what your government's supposed to do for you. If it works well at all, it's supposed to give you some sort of peace of mind that we're in it together, that you're not going to die in the woods by yourself.
Yes.
That like the reason we do taxes is, hey, if we pool our money together, we can build a road. And then, hey, we could have more jobs because we have roads. We can build literally bridges, right, to one another and to cities, etc. And we can give ourselves a little peace of mind that we're not going to die alone in the woods.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the government does everything right, and does it overstep? Of course it does. Look at our Defense Department and all the wars we've started. And the list goes on and on, right? But that is the best of us. And we had a little sense of it for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. And if you take that away from people, you take away their hope and their peace of mind, politically speaking, Republicans don't get it. There is going to be a significant, and I would argue, massive reckoning. Help us with Operation Watchdog. Help us hire 4 new reporting teams. We could be the watchers on the wall. Make sure we keep Trump and the establishment in check. TYTnetwork.com/go.